Let's turn our microphones off and
I just want to confirm that you guys can see my screen now. Is that thumbs up?
Correct. We can
Perfect.
see your screen and hear your voice. So
Fantastic.
you're number one, Patrick. Ready to go.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much to everyone at SOSA. This is a really great initiative that you guys have started. Lots of great sharing happening out of SOSA right now with the Thermal podcast and the Hangar flying seminars. So I really appreciate the opportunity to come in and talk about proving grounds. And really our approach here is glider pilot to soaring pilot in 3 simple steps. So we'll talk a little bit about how the platform came to be, some guidance that we provide clubs that are thinking about creating an instance for their gliding club. And we'll just kind of go through some of the presentation. So just like in my notes here. So I think when we talk about soaring to the converted, we appreciate that there's very little else that people can do that compare to soaring. It's spectacular and accessible, and it's one of the, really one of the most engaging and exhilarating things maybe human beings can do. And increasingly, our perspective is that gliding is increasingly accessible, actually. So there's great gliders at clubs. You haven't really had an inadequate glider produced in about 35 plus years. I'm sure we could debate that, but there are underutilized machines pretty much at every club that we're familiar with across Canada. Weather forecasting has never been more accessible or accurate. If we think about the evolution from SKU-Ts to Dr. Jack to SkySight today, the ability to forecast and predict weather phenomena that we can exploit. We have a very low barrier on flight computers and moving maps. So if you're working at the club to implement XC-SOAR devices on old Android phones, when we compare that to the moving maps and in-panel displays, not to take away from those incredible pieces of equipment, but again, the barrier to entry quite low. And actually our story has never been easier to share. Of course, we have the OLC, but posting traces on skylines provides a link to an actual map that my mom can make sense of, whereas the topography heat map in OLC is a little bit confusing. And then we think about the content that we're able to share on services like Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn with incredible imagery. It really is, we think, a really great time to be involved in soaring to attract new people to the sport. So getting started in the tools that are required have never been more accessible, but new pilots we know can be fickle, and gliding clubs are not inherently inviting, so many of them lose their path after solo. I will commend SOSA has an enviable cross-country culture and development culture where most clubs do not have this benefit. So if we start to think from the new member, the novice member experience, and we think about the milestones to those new to the sport, the thrill of the first solo, their first half hour of sustained flight, their first full hour, 1,000 feet of climb in a single thermal. These enabling points are kind of something that we don't think about anymore, but are really transformative to the novice pilot. But we kind of ask the question, what happens to those members once they lose that path of growth? Some of them have this trouble finding the path to the passion that we're all familiar with, that is for many of us a compelling addiction. And then I think what we're trying to do with the Proving Grounds is close this gulf between the recently solo novice pilot and then the cross-country champions of the club. I think even just hearing the chatter before this meeting started about flying from SOSA to Tillsonburg to east of York and then coming back, many of us that have flown cross-country in Southern Ontario, myself included, can kind of paint a mental picture of that, but we would appreciate that a novice pilot might be quite confused with what that means as far as a cross-country flight go. So I think what we're trying to do with soaring with Proving Grounds here is to really consider that pilot that's stuck between recently solo and flying York Soaring, Lucan, Flesherton, New Hamburg, York Soaring, and see if we can create a safe path for growth to make it clear and provide the confidence to the club that these individuals are capable of taking club machines for long distances. So I'll just kind of contextualize Proving Grounds in my case and how this platform really would have helped me. So I'm in my 21st year of gliding, or 21st year since I received my glider pilot's license. 2 years ago, I guess 3 years ago, I did some back-to-back 500s after I moved out to Alberta. But my path in gliding, I think, was a lot slower than it needed to be had tools been available to me to help accelerate my development. So I'm a CRGS pilot, and then after the cadet program, I was flying at York with kind of a figure it out yourself development culture there. In 2016, I took a club glider to the MayFly. I also managed and participated in the Nationals at York in 2016. I moved to Alberta in 2017, raced in the provincials, did some pretty good flying in 2017, and then actually won my first provincial contest this year, hosted at my club, which I fly currently at Cu Nim. So if I look back, it took me a really long time to learn the language of soaring. It was 4 years of participating at a soaring club before I had any decent flight to post on the OLC. And in retrospect, it's kind of frustrating for me about how much time I spent, you know, not to use the term wasted, because it was supportive, but underutilized or below potential. What's even worse when I think about my experience is to think about all of the students and all the members, the enthusiastic ones that came to the sport and left before discovering the challenge yet relative ease of flying cross country. And I would like to highlight some lessons from the 2016 MayFly, or the MayFly contest generally, as being transformative and really informing what we're doing here with Proving Grounds. So for those that don't know, the MayFly is a contest that the Gatineau Gliding Club hosts every year on the Victoria Day long weekend. It's an incredibly supportive contest. It's a task flying environment, whereas most competitions, use of the radio is frowned upon. It's proactively encouraged, this contest. And what was really interesting in flying at the MayFly with members or pilots from Rideau Valley Soaring Society, Montreal Soaring Club, and Gatineau Gliding Club is that all people in the region, whether they were in the contest or not, were familiar with the fixed task 1, task 2, and task 3 in the region. And it was evident to me that it really supported a shared understanding of the terrain that the pilots could fly over. That when you said task 1, everybody knew what that was. It wasn't a list of turn points. Same would go for task 2 and task 3, obviously. And that the tasks supported a stepwise development for pilots, building confidence in their abilities. And I would expect that this remains the foundation, or is the foundation, of cross-country soaring at GGC, if not the other clubs in the region. So for me, this was a real winning approach to creating a cross-country development framework that was static, but it still required member development and member time. Roger Hildesheim evaluates the tasks through the contest weekend against CU to provide all the scoring. And what we're really looking for in Proving Grounds is something that's very low maintenance. Another informing component here is for those that are familiar with the BBC show, the original Top Gear program. They use these magnetic boards with metal boards with magnetic strips to record top times for high-profile vehicles or for stars in a reasonably priced car. But this is it's a DIY ranking system. It provides public recognition. It's tactile. It works as a trophy. It's a little bit unscientific, let's say. So this was a big part, or something that also informed what we wanted to develop with the Proving Grounds. So in 2018, we had implemented the kind of first generation of the Proving Grounds at Cu Nim Gliding Club, where we had defined tasks and magnetic boards with the magnetic strips, or so the metal boards with magnetic strips, for pilots to self-assess their task time. And then if competition really got fierce, we could break open CU and evaluate the tasks. It was effectively a near total failure. The how to score, scoring support, all of these questions required the level of member engagement that we were really hoping to avoid and try to create an autonomous system. Through the winter of 2019, we had one of our members, Casey Brown, is a new member to gliding, but super capable technically. He sought to break out IGC file altitude and location turn points, or points to validate against the defined tasks. And in early 2019, the Alberta Soaring Council provided a bit of capital to us to create an email bot to really make this a scalable solution, and they supported the installation at the 4 clubs in, sorry, that should say Alberta. So at that point, early 2019, we had a system that would evaluate your IGC file against defined tasks, and you would email that in and email it back. And then that's when we had really something that we thought was ready to scale. That brings us to today. So coming into this soaring season is the kind of fits and starts that we're experiencing influenced by the COVID-19 pandemic. We have 13 clubs across Canada that have configured a proving grounds. Most clubs received their kits in the late 2019 season. Even though many clubs received this equipment late in the season, we had over 400 flight traces processed by the bot. So those would be successes, failures, and tests. And we have implemented 2 French-speaking clubs, so it's now a French and English platform, and really built to scale. So that's kind of where we're at today, but looking to increase our exposure around the world to interested gliding clubs. So any help that you might be able to provide and creating some of those conversations would be appreciated. We've got some pretty interesting feedback. I think if you do a Control F for Proving Grounds in the 2019 annual reports from SAC, there's a lot of enthusiasm expressed from many clubs that have received this equipment. We did hear feedback from Toronto Soaring Club and Rideau Valley Soaring Society that inclusion of average speeds would be beneficial. So through 2019 and 2020, we did implement average speed calculations based on distance flown. So that's kind of where we're at with respect to, and recognizing that we don't want to be changing the rules as on the go. That the static rules will help the longevity of the system and of the platform. The scores will stand over time. So I think we're pretty comfortable with the rule set that we have implemented right now. One of the big takeaways for me is I flew a flight with one of our students, and he's getting close to solo, but there'd been a gap in his training, and he'd kind of lost the why of the training, and we went and did a racetrack, which is very accessible. It's a local task, and when he filled out the task sheet and put it on the board, you could see him welling up with tears of pride as though he's getting recognition, where a lot of the cross-country people walk around boasting about 400 or 500 kilometer flights. This student pilot was now part of the group of mentors, and that for me was really strong validation that the novice pilot, these starting pilots, that this is going to be a platform that would really serve them into the future. Talking a little bit about the platform that we offer and kind of the tasks that are available. So this is the Cu Nim proving ground. So we have a diamond pattern around the gliding club. Each point is no more than 15 kilometers away. With a racetrack task, and SOSA has this as well, but the obvious start-finish line is going to be the club. Any turn point can be a start and must be reached to complete a lap, and you can do successive laps to get the fastest scored time or highest speed, however you want to rank it. What's nice with this is that this remains a safe task for any pilots about 1,500 feet above circuit height with kind of a 20-to-1 glide ratio. So it's something that can support kind of the bronze level pilot, the time builder. You don't have to have a cross-country endorsement in order to get some exposure to task flying and the thrill of completing a task. Triangles follow the racetrack, so they can be flown clockwise or counterclockwise. It just depends on the club configuration. We recommend 100 and 150 kilometers. So those are a bit larger. It's a more advanced cross-country environment, which is great. But we encourage clubs to define them over safe terrain with good land out options, and that they build on each other so that if you're unsuccessful in doing the large task, you still have an option for success on the medium task. There are some other rule variations that we accept. So we are doing 2-kilometer cylinders on turn points, but we could do FAI rules. That just makes it even harder for the novice pilot, although some of the tenured cross-country folks that we talk to seem to prefer that, but we always are trying to reset the expectation that this is for novice pilot development. And we'd like to see some out and return tasks implemented. So here in Alberta, we have the Livingston Range, which is like this 30-kilometer knife edge north-south range outside of Cowley. I'd like to see some top times on that as a single run. You know, SOSA might consider someday like a Lake Erie convergence time trial. So this can scale depending on your creativity, but this is what we're offering primarily, or what we're encouraging clubs to adopt as far as a framework for safe cross-country flying development. The kits are really an important part. There is a trophy aspect. This is the SOSA kit. This is our model for the website. So these are all stainless steel, laser cut and etched task boards. We ship 50 magnetic slips, so 15 for each task board plus 5 extras. They're labeled with white vinyl so they won't get UV bleached. And we're really hoping that this becomes a fixture for years to come as something that does not require a ton of member time to maintain, and you know, certainly will stand the test of time. We ship laminated task sheets for inclusion in a club glider and loose task sheets for members to mark up or for whatever purpose they're interested in. They can always be printed at any time the PDF is available. And in 2020, we sent a branded clip to hold the task sheets. Something that we found at Cu Nim was that these were getting lost frequently, so we wanted to support clubs in making this really a one-stop shop in order to serve the members that are interested in engaging with the platform. So this is really the technology of the solution is the bot. So when you're done flying a flight, you obviously have an IGC trace. We ask you to email that to your club's bot. So for SOSA, it's sosa@soaringtasks.com. The trace is automatically evaluated against the tasks, and the result is returned to the requesting email address. Task times and average speed are going to be provided, and if your glider type matches one that's listed in the SSA handicap list, you'll get handicap speeds. We're also going to be building more functionality at email requests into the system. So right now, if you sent an email with the word task to sosa@soaringtasks.com, you would, get the cup file back with the turn points that are used with the SOSA proving grounds. So this is what we have set up at Cu Nim. Really the emphasis remains just to go flying and try the tasks. Encourage attempts relative to pilot abilities, skills, what have you. It is designed to be part of a supportive cross-country culture. It's an opportunity for mentors to fly with students, get them familiar with the terrain, familiar with the turn points, familiar with flying effectively AAT rules. I would encourage more tenured cross-country pilots to consider your large tasks when you're flying on a larger day. If you hit the first turn point of the triangle on your way out to a much further location and then hit the second turn point on the triangle on your way back, you might set like a 4 or 5 or 6 hour time on that task, which provides a window for the novice pilot to beat their mentors, and it also validates the system as a platform for growth within the club. But obviously you just really want to have fun with it, and that's what we'd certainly encourage. As we come into the 2020 season, this is our effectively 3rd season with the Proving Grounds at Cu Nim, so we're starting to think about how we can build on the change in culture that it has facilitated. So we're actively encouraging flying and to record every success through the season. What we had to do at the end of the 2019 soaring season is we wiped the task, the magnetic slips, so that a pilot only had 1 slip on the board at the start of this season, and we're going to retain only the top 5 times overall year on year, so that there's lots of room every year for new times to come in, but for those best times that they'll stand as a marker to work toward. We are encouraging or suggesting that clubs consider awarding a prize. I know Toronto Soaring Club is offering a free arrow tow for a top time. If you want to find a local sponsor to sponsor the task, that's an interesting way to do it as well. Or organize a fun task around, a fun event around the tasks. And we'd love to know what you're going to do. We can share that in a newsletter that we're going to put out. One thing we've talked about at Cu Nim is that everyone throws $10 in a pot, and the fastest task through the weekend takes the pot. Or we have this idea of the Growler 500. We don't know how to make it 500 kilometers or what have you, or the Growler Grand Prix where you win a growler of beer if you win the contest. But the idea here is really just want to use this automatic solution, a common rule set to have some fun and encourage people to come out to the gliding club and to take a flight and attempt a task. So just a little bit about, so this is the team of the people behind this program and platform. So many of you at SOSA would know Chris Goff. He's our tasks and rules expert. Kate is also a member of SAC's sporting committee. Casey Brown is an engineer. Everyone, I guess, has kind of KW roots here. So he went to University of Waterloo, and he's the brains behind our technology. He's a third-year glider pilot, but very enthusiastic about the sport and contributing. As I said, I grew up soaring, at least at York Soaring. I grew up in Waterloo. And our approach really is that the future of this sport requires more people discovering how awesome soaring is, and that converting novice pilots into soaring pilots is important for all of us. And so we are hoping that the solutions that we can put together can help novice pilots find that path to a lifelong love of soaring, and for clubs to thrive with the growth of those members. And with that, if there's any questions, or certainly thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today, I'd certainly open up the floor to any questions.
Hi, Patrick. Steven Sikora here. Is there a concern that in some clubs the mentality might develop that the experienced pilots just start racing around these things and the novice pilots feel like they can't, even get on the board effectively?
Like, I think that might be a risk in a very, very large club, but if you are one of those pilots that's racing around the task, like, you have the opportunity to maybe only leave your individual best time up on the task. So unless you've got the top 15 in this case, cross-country pilots cruising through that smallest task, would that become a risk? And then if you reset that task board at the end of the year, you have 10 open spots at the bottom to go through the next soaring season. I don't know if how attractive the smallest task will be to the highest profile kind of competition pilots. It is certainly a risk, and I would be interested to understand how clubs would manage that specifically if it became an issue in their particular club. But I think there are a number of ways to mitigate that risk, and hopefully just completing a task. Like, the idea, I know when I talk to my friends and I say, I'm flying from point to point, they are amazed because they think that it's just a miracle you can stay up at all, let alone fly with any sense of direction and then speed. And if we think about like the general public that might have that opinion, that's also effectively true for novice pilots in many cases. So going around a course powered only by ingenuity and Mother Nature, hopefully is somewhat of a reward. But I would definitely agree with you that there would be a risk that if the ranking sheet was just full of the club's competition pilots, that would not necessarily be explicitly supportive to novice pilot development.
Can I throw in a couple of cents worth on that as a soaring pilot from SOSA?
Sure.
I doubt that any of your self-respecting cross-country pilots are going to be loading the board up. They're going to be going out elsewhere and doing some big tasks to put up some big points on the OLC. Going out and loading the board up. If we're out there doing the racetrack or something like that, chances are we have a student tagging along behind us. I don't think that's going to be a problem. Any self-respecting cross-country pilot's going to go do some real cross-country and not stoop to, hoarding the board, so to speak. Although there may be a few that have too big an ego to, walk away from that opportunity.
Yeah, I took off at like 4 o'clock on Wednesday. I've just do my first flights in a new glider, and I kind of strolled around the racetrack at Cu Nim. It's a local task. It's, one of the comments there from John Mulder at Central Alberta Gliding Club is that, it gives you something to do on a day where you might otherwise not take off, and getting takeoffs at Gliding Club is important. So, yeah, I would agree that I would not expect, competition pilot to prioritize the racetrack over a large day, but I would also encourage the mentors in the club to consider some of the tasks, the larger tasks, the middle task, as a way to validate the platform for the novice pilots. If it's seen as a tool for the lower tier pilots, that I think becomes counterproductive potentially in the culture development. But that's of course going to be a club decision and a pilot decision. Chris Goff has not flown a single task in the proving grounds, even though he's like made it. And I tried to get him to do one on Wednesday, but he said his pee bags were full. So I guess that's a Chris Goff problem for those that know Chris Goff. But anyhow, yeah. So I think, I would encourage you all to fly tasks and get names on the board. But yeah, I don't expect that you're going to waste a day that would, like, the day that's supportive for the top times is a day that you want to be going longer distances. And yeah, I like the idea of bringing a student along and shepherding them through. That's a really great way to be supportive in that cross-country development, for sure.
Don't know how well you guys can hear me, but one possible fix to that could be to have like a fourth board for honorable mentions. So say like a club, like the top guys, if they want to race around and put a good time up, they could go on like a separate board where they can still compare themselves to everybody else, but then you just save the regular board for the newer pilots.
Like, I think if you limit the task, if SOSA is a kind of large member base, active cross-country club, maybe just the rule is Patrick can only have his name on each task once, and then you're likely to leave room on the board for those novice pilots to put times up. But yeah, I think I'd be really interested to see updates of how they're used at a large club like SOSA, with such a rich cross-country culture, to see if this is a problem that we have to kind of more proactively consider for other clubs around the world.
If you flew a 500 that year, your name comes off.
Yeah, I don't personally like that, but if that's the rule that SOSA wants to do, then it's at your discretion. How you guys implement this thing is up to you.
Yes,
No, it's
Paul
up to
here. I
Paul.
mean, my suggestion would be, it's your creation. We should start with your model, but personally, I think that we might decide to use different, when the board fills up, and here I'll just share my thinking with you. What was our best cross-country year was 2016, and we actually had 51 pilots record flights on the OLC. And so, of course, I'd like to see 15 on each of those tasks. But if there are more, I would almost say it should be the most recent 15. That way you're still trying to do a task in October and not worry about, am I going to beat my May or June time? But
Sure.
the first thing is to get them up there, right? So
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
we can change rules later if required, but I think this is a great tool you've created. Other questions for Patrick here?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment or a suggestion. Can you hear me?
Sure, go ahead.
Yep.
Yeah. Hi. So I'm a relatively new pilot. I just did all my solos at the end of the season, so I didn't get to do any of the proving grounds. But I'm very enthusiastic, and So this winter I started doing a lot of training on Condor, and so I took our proving ground task. I'm from Rideau Valley Soaring, so you know Uli. So I took our proving ground tasks and created Condor tasks for with them, so I could practice them on Condor. You know, so it's and you kind of alluded to something earlier, Patrick. You know, the steps it takes to get to cross country, there are a lot. You know, I'm glad you were kind of acknowledging, you know, without guidance and without determination and without a whole bunch of factors, it takes years. And I thought, well, okay, someday, you know, maybe I'll get to fly, you know, in 5 years from now, a 100-kilometer task. But I tell you, with the proving grounds, plus more importantly, the experience that I've had in Condor, I go, well, yeah, it's like, you know, I've jumped over a lot of little hurdles that you would have to go through. It would take you a season or two to go through. So anyways, I just encourage that that's another very useful thing for people to do, to create Condor tasks of their proving ground tasks, and they can bring people along, you know, and our club is going to have a Condor simulator for our club. So, you know, you could easily take a pilot to introduce them in cross country and say, well, you know, let's fly it on. Obviously, you could take them out in dual and go do the, you know, the short task, and then say practice it on your own in Condor, you know, and then as always as stepping stones. So anyways, just some ideas, just sharing some stuff.
No, I think that's really great feedback, and your club has been incredibly proactive in providing support and insight, and it's great to see how RVSS has embraced it. So I think that feedback is super valuable as the feedback from the novice pilot considering this. I know Casey, as an example, who's not a cross-country pilot on our team, he had a little bit of a light bulb moment when he said, you know, if you do the racetrack 3 times, you've covered the distance of the largest task in the proving grounds. So like it's these enabling steps and trying to create a framework that doesn't require a mentorship weekend that invariably has poor weather, that hopefully we've created a tool here available to clubs that they can leverage to save you those years of punching through the sky and trying to figure it out.
Well, what you just said also refers to another thing. You said light bulb moment. And I think there's a lot of psychological hurdles that one has to go through. And so last year I was fortunate that I took some fairly long flights with some club members. And one day I was up with a member, and we were up there for almost 3 hours. And I was like, oh, okay, so I know that I could, you know, in the future, be comfortable flying for an hour or 2 or even 3 in a glider. And
Right. That's great.
That's great to hear. And Patrick, a couple other comments were coming in the chat. You might have noticed from Greg saying that the traveling trophy is a good analog. The good pilots don't bother with it. And then Eric saying, well, of course, you could also divide into categories by the experience level of different pilots. You know, aboard for the 300 hour or the 500 hour or the 1,000 hours. So there are lots of possibilities.
Sure. Yeah.
If the questions are slowing down, we might shift from the general proving grounds to the SOSA track, which I'm happy to talk about. So we'll just take a couple minutes to shift over from Patrick's to my system.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Patrick. You're, of course, welcome to stay on for the rest of the session.
Yeah, we'll do.
Thank you, Patrick. Much appreciated.
So do you see Proving Ground SOSA tasks?
Yes.
Excellent. That's good to hear. Now, is Dave on? Does somebody know how to turn on the spotlight so I can show where my cursor is on the screen?
If you go into the share screen, it's probably at the top of your screen now somewhere.
Yes, I have share screen.
Yeah,
Annotate.
If you go up there, it opens a sort of a bar.
Yes.
And there's a spotlight there. but we can also see your cursor actually
Well,
quite
you
well.
can, yeah, I don't, yeah, I do not see my cursor, but let me go back up. Spotlight, perfect. Okay, let's take this one. Ah, here we go. Can
Yeah,
you
there
see my
is.
spotlight?
Yeah,
Excellent.
I see your spotlight and I see your cursor.
Very good. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Patrick, for introducing us to Proving Ground. And of course, like most of us, I want to encourage cross-country flying. And so I'm happy to be a supporter of Proving Grounds and was involved in setting the SOSA tasks. And of course, I start with this screenshot, the picture from our SOSA homepage. This is sort of our out flying. And now, where are we going to go? So we want to encourage cross-country and putting this Proving Grounds tool to good use. And so let's hop up in that seat and share some thoughts about starting out. Now, there we go, that advances. I wanted to thank Dave. Remember our airspace talk by Dave? Lots of information. Look at this. This is a SOSA-centered aeronautical chart, but there is so much information. Thank you, Dave, for carefully taking us through this, and we see how it's centered here in SOSA. Oh, let's go. I see it. A little pause between when I hit the button and it moves. And I wanted to say thank you, Dave, for this image, because I want to talk today about why are there these 10-kilometer circles all around SOSA. And I want to use this as part of the thinking about for our early cross-country pilots, how do I develop the confidence? How do I develop the skills? And let's just start by expanding our range safely. So we're going to be looking at this type of a map, but let's go for a simpler version because there is a lot of detail on this one. So now we're back with this picture, and I agree that Yor gave us a very important talk about lookouts. We're looking to see, are there any other traffic on the horizon? I want to thank Chris for having us looking out to sharpen our understanding of what our land out options are. And I very much want to say from this gliding position, we're always thinking, how far can we go? Where can we safely land? So you're up here and you're thinking, okay, is this a safe landing place in this big green field, or should I be looking over in this brown one over here? We want to scan and say, where can we go? And how do we get used to judging those distances? How do we get used to choosing safe landing places? And especially in a year where we're trying to minimize contact. So we start with the simple physics of going cross country. I want to know, what is your glide ratio? So the glide ratio, of course, is how far are you going to go across for 1 unit down. You can start with that wing chute. It's only 3 to 1. So those are the people who live on adrenaline here. Get up to your space shuttle, 4.5 to 1. So it's a bit better, 50% better than your wingsuit. Pull the power off in your Twin Otter, 11 to 1. But we want to go gliding. We want to maximize that distance. We're going to get 25 to 1 or 30 to 1. And I want you to think about that glide ratio a little bit, because that's how we're going to get out and do this task du jour. So this is Rob's description, introducing these race tasks and the information that we have. Soaring tasks. Thank you, Proving Grounds has described our tasks as well as those at each of the other clubs. So this is a great resource that is available. What is the glide ratio that I want to use? How far can we stretch? What's the distance for the height? I want to use that magic number 30 to 1. So that means that you're going to get 30 units of distance for 1 unit of altitude. In other words, 1,000 feet of altitude loss will take you 30,000 feet. And that 1,000 feet, what's 30,000 feet is about 10,000 yards, or 10,000 yards is 10,000 meters or 10 kilometers. So in my head, as I'm flying, I have this very simple formula that says I can trade in 1,000 feet of altitude for 10 kilometers of distance. And my confession is that this is the formula I was taught when I was a brand new pilot flying Blaniks, which you'd be stretching it to get that 30 to 1 achieved. And in my head, I'm still using the same formula when I fly the Discus. So it's just easy to use as a reference point. Some gliders will make it more easily, some not so easily. Of course, the faster you fly, the faster you're coming down as well. But this 30 to 1 is a very good ratio for the novice pilot. Starting out looking at your cross-country world, thinking, I need to put 1,000 feet of climbing, go into that thermal, gain 1,000 feet, then I can cruise for my 10 kilometers. So it's kind of like stopping and adding an extra liter of gas. 1,000 foot gives us enough energy to convert into altitude, into that 10 kilometers of distance. So that's a very simple but useful formula to keep in your mind. Then you say, where do I want to make that? I start at home at Rockton, and I now draw this 10-kilometer circle around. And for those of you that are familiar with the area, okay, this is getting close to Cambridge. St. George is at the edge of that 10-kilometer circle, Peter's Corner. So you can start to say, okay, I can also convert this distance, 10 kilometers, into physical places that I know. I can see where St. George is. I know where Peter's Corners is. I know where Cambridge starts. So I have a sense of, okay, I'm 10K away from home. So you're 10K away from home. What height do you need to safely get back there? This is where you're doing the simple calculation. What height do I need to safely get back there? Well, I know Sosa is at 850 feet. I want to have 1,000 feet safety margin so I can easily join the circuit. So that means I need to have 1,850 feet when I get back home. I take my 10-kilometer ring. I'm going to add 1,000 feet for that. So I need to be 2,800 feet out on that ring, or approximately 3,000 feet. So basically, I'm thinking if I'm at St. George, I want to make sure I got 3,000 feet to safely get back home. So this is the simple calculation, that 10-kilometer ring, 3,000 feet, and I can get back home safely. If one ring works of 10 kilometers, then what if I add a second ring of 20 kilometers? And so this is the idea now. We're expanding the zone. So we've got Rockton as our home base, 10K out, 20K out. And now we know it takes that extra 1,000 feet to cross from 20 to 10, another 1,000 to get from 10 to home. And this is very simple, very easy to use in the back of your head. And I thought I would just share an anecdote in terms of how I still use this. This is Puslynch Lake sitting here. This is Reed's Field just across the 401. So here at Reed's Field, I remember a very deliberate decision, there was a day a couple of years ago, reasonable day, but it wasn't very high. It was actually a day when they were having the provincials up at Toronto Soaring. So I flew up to Toronto Soaring to see what the conditions were like up there. And I hear the familiar voice. Tom Colson's the director of the competition. He says, Paul, what's your altitude? And I'm saying 4,000 feet. And he's thinking, not enough to launch the contest. So it was actually a non-contest day there. So I thought, well, I'd better turn around and head back home. And so I'm doing my little zigzag, 1,000-foot climb, all the way back. And I come back to Puslynch Lake, and I'm sitting at 2,300 feet. The little thermal there, and just holding, I'm at 2,300 feet, and I'm going, where do I want? I want 28 here to get me safely home. Sitting at 2,300, not quite enough to get me home. This little thermal, not gaining ground, so go on the radio. Dear Sosa, Delta Whiskey planning to land out at Puslynch Lake. And so I land and then call for the tow plane to come, and it came and took me back home safely. So I really consider, this is a very safe place getting back home. But I didn't have the altitude. It was getting late in the day, and I just decided I'm not at my 28. I'm only at 23. Can't get that extra 500 feet. I'll safely put it down. So I guess that's what I would encourage other pilots as they're starting out and saying, always look to see where's a safe place to land. In this case, Puslinch Lake is very close, and you'll see that it is, of course, also part of very close by when we do the proving ground. What is our first, the calculations on that 20-kilometer ring? You're now adding 2,000 feet rather than 1,000, so that'd be 3,800 or approximately 4,000 feet. So that's our second ring around from Sosa. And here is where we have our racetrack course, so that you see from Rockton out to Cambridge, up to Reed's Field. And this is where we have Puslinch Lake. And I, of course, mention it because it's where you've done your practice out landing as part of the Bronze Badge program. So perfectly good place to land if you don't have the height. And of course, it runs back very close to home on the way to Peter's Corners and then back to Rockton. And we ask that you do this in a clockwise manner, so that way we're always going around and maintaining safe separation. But again, a very nice close, and so you're going, wow, 4,000 feet would give me lots of height to get home from any of this. That's right, furthest point, 3,500 feet, easily back home. So on a reasonable day, a very easy task for pilots to do. And so I want to encourage you as you're thinking about just saying, oh, look, I could actually go home from even the farthest point, no problem. So it's just recognizing what height do you need to be able to make a safe return home. So that's good for that sort of 50K task, or just under, doing the racetrack. But what if you want to stretch your wings a little further? How about a 100K task? And of course, this is the idea that Patrick introduced with the proving grounds of saying, let's start making them a little more ambitious. So let's look out to see what would the next task look like. And here, the task is Rockton, Brantford, New Hamburg, and back. So this gives you about 100 kilometers of flying. And in my head, I set it up the same way. I just start thinking about those 10-kilometer circles. So I see this task and I know my circles from Rockton. Here we go, that I can see that 10 kilometers, 3,000 feet, I can easily make it back. I start out towards Brantford. If I'm at St. George at 3,000 feet, I know I can easily go back to home if required. If I'm getting closer to Brantford, 4,000 feet, I can still safely get back home. To go all the way out here, safely back home, so you see about 4,500 feet, I can still safely get back home at that 30-to-1 ratio. So that's the story of doing a simple math to say, how high do I need to be to get back home? And of course, we hope that you find lift and not too much sink and other details. But if you practice aiming to try to achieve a 30-to-1 glide ratio, then this gives you a very simple calculator, and you can always check it to say, am I above or below that? If I started at 5,000 here and I'm at 4,000 on the next ring, I know, good, I'm making my 30-to-1, I should be able to make it home. If I'm a bit lower, I'm thinking, oh, I better find some more lift on the way, take another thermal. So that's how we simply think, and this becomes part especially of your thinking when you're talking about that final glide, from 5,000 feet here to 4,000 here to 3,000 here to safely home. Same idea, converting your height into distance. Okay, that's how I see my distance heading out. But now I want to encourage you to start thinking, oh, wait a minute, Brantford, that's another airport. That's another safe landing place. So what happens if we put the Brantford circles on as well? So this is the 10K circle around for Brantford. So I know from 3,000 feet, I can easily get into Brantford. Or I know that at the 20-kilometer circle from 4,000 feet, I can easily get to Brantford. So now we start seeing that even though we might be too low to get back home, we can easily get on to the next turn point or the next safe landing point. And again, I thought I'd share the anecdote. This is the town of Brantford. The airport is just beyond. I very we'll always remember Dan Bush was a great instructor in the club, and there was Dan that took me out for my first cross-country flight in the 505. And so we started off from Rockton. We started off across country, and it wasn't that strong a day. So, we're up to like 3,000 feet, but then we're losing ground and we're heading in. And Dan is thinking there's going to be a thermal over Brantford. So he's telling me just aim for Brantford. See the shopping malls there? There'll be lift there. And in the back of my head, my calculator is going, whoops, I'm below 3,000 feet and we're not going to be able to get it back. What are our options? And Dan is safely saying, no problem, no problem. From here, we can easily get into Brantford Airport. And so we know that we have that very safe option available. Yes, we're getting lower. He says, no, keep going, keep going. And so I did. And we come in over the shopping mall there, and boom, there was the thermal, just like we had hoped. And we were able to climb away nicely and carry on cross country. But it was just that very clear. He was saying, you have an option. You can always land safely at Brantford. And that was the truth of it. And so that's what I would encourage you to also think. That's right. We safely could go back home from some distances. Eventually we get further away from home. There are other safe places to land. And Brantford Airport is clearly one of those. That's why it's a good turn point. You can then also fly out to New Hamburg and come back home again with these circles for your final glide. You've got the ultralight land. There's a little strip in here is another point to land if required. And of course, there are fields for outlandings, but I'm focusing on airports for this talk. So this is the idea that you can see a point and think of it as a series of expanding 10-kilometer circles that provide a simple countdown for you. It's a 4,000, 3,000, safely to Brantford, a 2,000. Oh, I picked a thermal by the quarry there, and on I go. So that's all good. What about being more ambitious? Now you want to get your 50K. So we often recommend, we've got a couple standard legs that are 60 kilometers, that's well above your 50K requirement. So let's have a look at those. Let's stretch our wings a little further. And so here, the second triangle, we're suggesting Rockton, Tilsonburg, Stratford, and home. So now this is 170K, it's a bit further, or you can do it as an out and return, but both of these legs, each of these legs is over 50 kilometers. So you could do one independently as your 50K, or you can put them together and have a longer flight. You will also note that where we are flying here is actually virtually the same track. So although I'm talking about going from Rockton to Tilsonburg, you go, oh, wait a minute. I know there's an airport right here at Brantford, so I can safely land there if I start to get low along the way. So you've noticed where you have these safe landing options, come down to Tilsonburg, heading out to Stratford. Oh yeah, there's another airport right along the way. Stratford, another airport. So you think of these good, safe landing places as we make our way across country. So the same thing, our expanding circles, 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers out from Rockton. Same story going the other way, 30, 20, 10 into Tilsonburg. So I know like from 5,000 feet, 4,000 feet, 3,000 feet, I should be able to get to Tilsonburg if I achieve my 30-to-1 ratio. So it gives us a simple visualization of making that task. So those are our circles around Tilsonburg. Same going into Stratford. If I'm at 5,000 here, I know I've already got it made. If I'm higher, then I'll be above that. And then heading out again, 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers, and just converting that in your head. 1,000 feet should give me 10 kilometers, and then just check with the instruments, am I achieving that? So these are the circles around each of our turn points, and you can now imagine that as saying on a day with has cloud base at 5,000 feet, you can safely, anywhere in the entire task, you can safely to make it to one of the corner airports just from 5,000 feet. And of course, there are intermediate airports as we picked out. So there are even more insurance options or new places that you can land. So 10, 20, 30, yeah, I guess 10, 20, 30. So I know this is a 65K leg. And then this one is 55, less than the 60. And then the same 63, just a bit under. So this is our task 2. Would encourage you to go, and if there's other pilots, you might see them in a thermal on the way for the smaller task or on the way home on the smaller task. The idea is that by having overlapping triangles, that we also make it easier for pilots to see others along the way. Oh yeah, and they can help mark thermals, or we can help mark thermals for them, depending on the sequence, who gets there first. So that's the set of 3 triangles. Also important is the airport information. So on that handy card, laminated card that we put in each glider, you also have the runway directions, the elevation, and the radio frequency for each of them. There's also a reminder of where do I send my task at the end. So Proving Grounds has obviously included on the SOSA cards, the sosa@soaringtask.com. And once you send it in, it will quickly do the analysis and send you a measurement of your time back. Oh yes, Chris told me there were things I should do before I go out cross country. And so we always, of course, need to be thinking about land out, what's your checklist, and pre-flight checklist, having everything so that way you're safe and ready to go for your cross country task. So this just builds on another tool as part of your cross country training. But remember everything that has been included in previous sessions as well. Now you've landed. Ah, hooray, I'm back home. So now there are a couple technical things. You want to get your file. Where is your file? So the good news is the FLARM creates an IGC file from your task. So you can download it from the FLARM onto a data stick in each of our gliders, which you can then send off. Or, as many of us do, we have software on our phones. I use XCSOAR, there's iGlide, there are other options, but for example, in XCSOAR, it's created an IGC file for you as well. And to help us know more about that, Chris Goff is going to be giving a talk on XCSOAR as one of the more common platforms. So with your IGC file then, you've got your file either from the FLARM or from your phone, the 2 most common sources. And then you can send it to sosa@soaringtask. So this way you'll get the Proving Ground confirmation. And I would also suggest that you send it on to the online contest, the OLC. And if it's your first time, you'll need to create a personal account and add in some details, your name, your birth date, your club affiliation, etc. But then future claims, it's very easy. You just go up to OLC, submit file. It looks to where you've got your file saved on your phone, and you submit it, and it's done in a matter of a very short period of time. So that's quick and easy. In chatting with Patrick, Patrick also highlighted that you could also send it to Skylines, which he uses and others use. It's a good another platform to share your flights, and it will also check your airspace. So if you have any airspace violations, you might not want to make that an official record. Of course, you'll note that our Proving Ground tasks are laid out so that there is very little risk of an airspace violation. From SOSA, our most likely violation points are by going north through the Guelph corridor, getting too close to the Waterloo or Toronto control zones. And these triangles have been set out to the south, so that way we're not close, we're well away from Hamilton, well away from Waterloo, so it's all very low risk. But Skylines is another option for you to be aware of and thinking about in the future. Well, what does this Proving Grounds look like? And here I want to thank Rob Russell for being our first pilot of the season to try it out. So the 31st of May, Rob flew the task and submitted it and got the results back. And so this is what the results look like. It says completed SOSA racetrack in 32 minutes and 22 seconds. 43 kilometers was scored as the distance at 79 kilometers an hour and the handicap speed of 75. It's handicapped because he was flying the LS4 with a handicap of 0.95. You might also look at this and say, but 43, I thought the distances were a little larger, but these are 2-kilometer circles around each of the turn points. And so it's when you touch the turn point and go, so that makes it shorter on each of those turn points. But this is a good, these are the details that you get. You've got your time, you've got your speed, you've got your handicap speed. Now you can fill out your strip. So yep, Rob flew Delta Whiskey at 75.7, or the question is which speed. I would suggest we should use the handicap speed, so that way our higher performance gliders don't always win. And you can also see what time he hit each of the different turn points. So Rockton he hit at 1904, 7 minutes later he hit Cambridge, 5 minutes later Reeds Fields, 1916, then down to Peters Corners at 1933, and then 3 minutes back to Rockton. So this gives you the time at each. It also tells you the time that you were near each of those turn points. So before Rob left at 1904, and this is Greenwich Mean Time or Universal Time, he had spent half an hour thermaling, getting higher. So he'd actually presumably launched at 1829, spent half an hour flying locally, and then set out on the task. So it gives him the time adjacent to each of those turn points. So this is a very handy summary that gives you your distance, speed, and handicap speed. So this is the email that will be sent back to you by the Proving Grounds bot. So this is the information that you'll get. I just put it in 2 columns. It's actually just in one on the actual email that you'll get. Also, I suggest that you send it into OLC. So this is the same flight in OLC, and OLC, of course, divides it into 6 legs, so it includes his earlier flying. But you can see how Rob was flying near Rockton as we saw, and thank you, Rob, for doing this to give us this great learning example. Of course, OLC also shows height gain as you're climbing in that thermal, and then loss as you're running, and then climbing again. And so you can see how Rob got his climb height, started, got into another thermal, and with the wind blowing him back, started again, and then a quick dash out to Cambridge. Try this thermal, not so strong, keep on going. And now he goes up to Reeds Field, comes down and starts thermaling. And here I want to remind our young pilots that this is a very clever thinking of what is the weather like today for this turn point, because we've got this strong northwest wind. He's thinking, I want a thermal after the turn point. And while he's thermaling, he's being blown along the task. So it's actually helping him gain his height and cover the task, and then ready for the long dash down to Peters Corner and the quick dash back to Rockton. So well done, Rob. Thank you for doing this for us, so that the season has begun on Proving Grounds, and now we look to have more pilots adding their tasks to follow along. So this is the start, and I would suggest, in addition to sending it to OLC, in addition to Proving Grounds, you send it into OLC. It both supports and adds your record, but I confess, I only started using OLC when Dave said, yeah, but it's not about being the winner. It's about having the club being the winner. And so this is why I love to encourage all of us to fly and to add our team count into OLC, so that we're building the SOSA score. And if you look at what is the current standing, well, this was actually 2 days ago when I copied it. Sosa is already in this season in number 2 position behind the Canadian Rocky Soarings, where we have both 11,000 kilometers flown and recorded on the OLC so far in this season. And so we're off to a good start. And of course, I hope we have many more good flights. And I hope that even every racetrack course, every 50 kilometers counts. It doesn't have to be the 500K flight of the day. Every 50K counts and helps the club total. So I want to encourage all of these small cross-country tasks, as well as the bigger ones, to develop your skills and support the club. So back to the beginning, sitting comfortable here, looking out, saying, yes, I know there's a safe landing place. Let's get out and fly cross country. Use all of these details that Dave has provided in our chart and know that, yep, good, safe airport here in Brantford. I can see how I can imagine in my head, I see these arches, these circles around me. I'm going, I can safely get, how far can I get to that next place? Is it 5,000 feet? It means I'm going to be able to get 30 kilometers up the track before I need to either find more lift or a safe place to land. So happy flying. I encourage you to use Proving Grounds. Happy to answer any questions, but that is the overview that I wanted to provide and encourage everybody to go fly and have fun. Happy to answer any questions people might have. You can unmute and chat and say, Rob, that's a great task, but you know, one day someone's going to do a faster one.
Paul, it's Alan here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Alan.
You talk a lot about Reed's Field, and you know, Reed's is sort of very close to the tasks. I think we need to make sure people understand that there are some runway lights on one end of the field. I never know which side it is. So I don't ever go in there, and I tend to have longer wings than other people, but I think it's just something that we need to make sure that people are aware of that with Reed's.
I agree very strongly. I've never gone into Reeds. That's why I wanted, sorry, I was hoping I was talking about Puslinch, because Reeds is the turn point, but Puslinch Lake, the field there that we use for our practice outlanding, is the one I would certainly recommend for our pilots to use as a grass strip. But yes, there's a slope, but it's easy to land, and it doesn't have those, either the lights, and I understand they're also along the side in front of the hangar there at Reeds Field. So I agree completely with you.
It is something that we should just put a disclaimer somewhere that is a field that's, unless you really know what you're doing, you probably should go in there.
Yeah, that's a good point. So in my head, I certainly see Puslinch Lake as the appropriate airfield in that corner, because the two are just a couple kilometers apart. They're very close together.
But a novice pilot is going to fly along and see Reeds Field and say, "Oh, good, I can go land there." Yeah,
I think especially
Rob
because
Rob just put a comment there, and I was about to say the same thing. Rob did a great job of covering all the hazards at Reeds Field, and as his comment says, don't land at Reeds Field, land at Puslinch.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I agree completely. That's the message we want.
I did have a question. How long does it take for you to send the email to get the email back?
My understanding is that it is very quick. I haven't actually done this, but full disclosure, Rob actually had to do a little checkup on the first one of the season. But the system is supposed to be very quick. And certainly I know OLC now, where it used to be quite some time, now it's back in a matter of a couple minutes. Like I land, I send off OLC, you know, I don't get the battery out of the glider before it's already back and confirmed and so on. So these bots should be very quick, you know.
Be less than 30 seconds for the Proving Grounds.
Yeah, there you go.
As soon as it actually worked, it took less than 60 seconds for me to get my reply.
Thank you. So yes, you'll have lots. You've got the information before you send it from the hangar, and you'll have the information before you get to the clubhouse.
Going back to the Reeds Field, Puslinch Lake, why don't we start changing or stop talking about Reeds Field and encourage just the use of Puslinch Lake for either a turn point or a reference point? since Reed's Field is not the desirable place.
Well, my suggestion is that it's convenient as it's a very obvious landmark and airfield, and the Puslinch is a little closer, and it would shorten our task a little bit. But because it's on the inside of that task, it's also very easy for us to reach if we're out towards Reed's Field. Rob, did you have something there?
Yeah, making the turn point Puslinch has the risk of putting the turn point too close to the Waterloo zone. So if we were using the turn point in a contest and people were congregating there, that would make it harder to maintain separation. Remember, a turn point is something to turn around and then keep going. And your list of landable airfields is in a separate database in the computer. It's a separate list on your knee board and stuff. So Reed's Field is identifiable and ideally situated right on the south side of the corridor. So you can hit that turn point and then blow through the corridor, minimizing your time in the corridor as well. So there are some safety reasons why Reed's Field is a better turn point. Just don't land there. There's lots of non-landable turn points on that map in front of you as well.
True.
No, I was just like for the nomenclature of it. I mean, people, okay, which one is it I can't land at? Which one shouldn't I land at? And yes, we should know that from our bronze, but it just eliminates the usage of Reed Field and therefore encouraging or reinforcing to land at Puslinch. But I get both.
Yeah, I mean, it's a reasonable point, but I guess we would hope that we have all of our pilots trained to Reed's Field is an official aerodrome. You can land there, but in general, Puslinch is a safe and readily available preferred site.
Yeah, you can land there, but you can't get a tow out like you can at Puslinch.
Yeah, I confess when I back to Puslinch, I feel like I'm home already. You know, it's just if I can't make it home, it's just a quick aero tow, and it's the same as having another launch. You're not taking the tow plane away for a long time or anything, so it's very convenient. And if in this Puslinch, in this time of COVID, of course, if you can have an aero tow back, it avoids retrieves and people in cars, and so it's just convenient to be at an airfield that way.
Just a comment that I don't see any information on Puslinch Lake on the backside. You do have Reed's Field listed though.
I guess the assumption was that people would know Puslinch Lake from the bronze badge exercise of having gone and had their first off SOSA landing there.
Yeah, just maybe if it was mentioned there, particularly the elevation. I mean, it doesn't really have a frequency or a runway number associated, but the elevation may be helpful. And it may just having it say Puslinch Lake may key someone to, who's under a lot of stress at the moment, deciding you're going to have to land out, maybe guide them that, hey, this is where we want to go into the Reed's Field.
Right, and of course it's basically the same as Reed's Field. I mean, it's probably 50 feet lower or something, but it's just the other side of the 401. So are people feeling they would like to venture out and try some of these?
Yes.
Good, because that's the idea, of course, is saying, oh, that 50 worked. Well, now I better try the 100, and just gain confidence with each one. Because I really do thank Dan Bush. I'll always remember that flight because I know my heart was beating louder as I was feeling we were coming down lower, getting in over Brantford there, and we're going, 2,500 feet. How far can we get? But boom, we got the thermal and climbed away nicely. But I remember Dan watching his computer saying, yes, we've got easily can get into Brantford as an alternative. So having those safe places that you can land in your head is a good way to be confident for your cross-country flying. We have safe places to land and safe places to get back.
That and heading south will be a new experience. I've never been south. I've been north.
Well, it's all about new experiences, yes. So you just sort of go, okay, here's Brentford, here's Norwich, here's Tilsonburg, on to St. Thomas. Various safe landing points along the way.
Follow the convergence down to Tilbury.
There you go. You could go back home and return, of course.
Gentlemen, I'm going to bid you good night. I think I'm going to
Very
start
good.
a drive. I think I'm going to start my drive back to Sosa.
Excellent. Well, look forward to seeing you at Sosa. So thank you all. And again, sort of convert that 1,000 feet equals 10 kilometers. And of course, we also have to remember, Jorg was mentioning, but if that final glide is into a headwind, you're going to need a little, it'll be a little harder to achieve your glide ratio. And of course, if you have a tailwind, then it's even easier for you to achieve that glide ratio. And that glide ratio does, of course, depend on your speed. So you've got a few different elements of control there. But as a quick reference point, it's very handy to have your mental math. So that way you're not looking at the computer, you're looking out, seeing the area that you can safely reach and fly for it. So I just want to encourage people to get out and have a great season. Good to see more pilots being added today to the flying list, and hope that we get more and more openings over time. Anything
Thanks
else
for the
you wanted
invitation,
to cover,
Sosa.
Jorg? Thank you, Patrick.
Well, thank you very much, Patrick. Thank you very much, Paul. So any last questions?
Well, look forward to seeing everybody flying.
Yep. Well, let's go fly. And as I said, thanks a lot for doing this. It was really good.
No, happy to help. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks for doing it. Have a good one. Take care. See you on the
Okay.
OLC or Skylines.
Yes, all the best.
Take care.
I will.
Thanks, gentlemen, and good night.
Good night.
Yeah, good night. I saw you dozing off there a couple times.
It's 3 in the morning here. So,
Yep. Yeah.
well, not quite, but yes,
I guess bedtime.
it's bedtime. Good night.
Everybody's dropping.
Yeah.
And, okay.
The countdown, 10, 9, 8. And thank you, Rob. That was very handy to have your file to look at as an illustration for everybody.
You're very welcome. And I put it in the chat, but I'll buy a beer for whoever knocks me off the first place.
Very good.
Probably going to be my last time ever in first place on that thing. But
oh, that's not a bad flight, though. That was good. That was good.
yeah, I got way too high before the last turn point, and I had a lot of wasted altitude when I got back. But
yeah, well, that's what I thought. Three minutes screaming home, but
3 minutes screaming home through 10 knots of lift.
no.
I was doing 90 knots, and the variable was showing 10 knots up.
Wow.
For that just about the entire run back from Peter's Corners, it was.
Now, if only
I
you
hadn't
could order
had the
that
task,
for next time.
if I hadn't had the task I was trying to complete, I would have slowed down and gone somewhere else.
Oh, very nice, very nice.
And I'm seeing that we seem to have XPY insured now.
Yes, I wondered which one they were. I knew they had to have something for the checkouts today, right? So that would be XPY then.
Yeah. So checkouts are open to just about anyone now?
I would ask Jorg. I see that
Okay.
there were at least 4 or 5 people that did check out, that were listed to have their checkouts today. I assume those took place.
Yeah, my when he announced the weather thing for Thursday, I thought it was on Thursday instead of on Wednesday for Thursday, so I missed out on that chat. I'll circle back with Jorg and see if there's a video I can watch.
Okay, that's a good point. If I stop sharing the screen, I should be able to turn off the recording. Stop video.
Yeah, stop recording.
Yeah, I just don't see a stop recording button here, but if I stop the sharing, now I can